My name is Maggie Ellery, 30 years old. Snow sifted down in featherweight pieces as I pulled into the Riverside Country Club lot at 6:15 on Christmas Eve. The building glowed behind the bare trees, each window trimmed with white garland and pin-bright gold lights that made the whole facade look lacquered and soft. My 4-year-old Subaru sighed when I cut the engine, its heater fan winding down like a tired violin. Luxury cars lined the front row, BMWs, Mercedes, one black Bentley idling with a thread of steam from its exhaust. But I drove to Self Park and slid into a spot near the back where the snow stayed undisturbed longer. I'd chosen a dark green dress, simple and warm, with my grandmother's pearl necklace sitting like a quiet promise at my throat. Nothing flashy. I'd learned a long time ago that blending in made things smoother with my family. The cold found the skin of my wrists as I stepped out. The snow under my heels made that crisp, sugared sound. I took in the lobby through the glass. Orange light, polished wood, a poinsettia arrangement the size of a small child, and then I saw them clustered at the entrance. My father centered, shoulders squared, in a tailored suit that suggested a permanent podium. My mother stood just off his elbow, red cocktail dress, fitted like it remembered every seamstress's stitch. My brother Derek, beside his wife Cynthia, both expensive and composed like a magazine spread. When they spotted me, a flicker of relief went through me despite myself. Family, I thought, even when it doesn't feel like it. Maggie, my father said when I reached the steps. His voice never bothered pretending to be warm. You're here. Merry Christmas, Dad, I smiled at my mother. You look beautiful. Her smile sharpened the way a knife does when it's honed. There's been a change of plans, dear. I paused, the door's brass handle cold against my palm. What kind of change? Tonight's dinner is members only, Dad said, crossing his arms like he was the door. Club policy, very strict on holidays. I blinked at him. But I'm family. You're family, my mother agreed. But you're not a member. The way she said member carried the weight of a velvet rope and a list that never had my name. The club has standards, sweetheart, you understand. Derek took a half step forward, palms up. Come on, Maggie, don't make this difficult. We told you weeks ago we were upgrading our membership, platinum level, very exclusive during peak dates. You told me you were having Christmas dinner here and I should come, I said, keeping my voice leveled. You didn't mention members only. Circumstances change, Cynthia said, eyes dropping to admire her manicure. The club can't have non-members cluttering the dining room at peak time. It affects the atmosphere. Cluttering, I repeated, the word tasting like metal. It's about maintaining a certain quality, Mom said. People expect that when they pay premium fees. Dad's expression softened a degree, which somehow hurt more. Look, we're not trying to be cruel. It's reality. You're not at the same level as the rest of us. You work at that nonprofit. You live in that little apartment. You drive that, he gestured vaguely toward the darkness, economy car. This club is for people who've achieved certain things in life. And I haven't achieved those things, I said. Not yet, Mom supplied, generous as a loan shark. Maybe next year. Tonight, maybe try Applebee's. Festive enough. Around us, members drifted by with greetings that landed on my parents like confetti. George, Patricia, lovely. Their faces turned warm for others, cooled when those others passed. I thought of the first door I'd been told I wasn't ready to walk through, age 11, after a piano recital where I'd played Schubert imperfectly. My mother had knelt to my height and said kindly, Some rooms aren't meant for you yet. Aim higher, try harder. I had, for years. Embarrassing for who? I asked. For everyone, Dad said. We're building relationships here, important ones, standing at the entrance like, well, it doesn't look good. Like I'm a beggar, I said softly. Don't be dramatic, Mom snapped. We're realistic about hierarchies. You're 30 years old. You should understand how the world works. I looked at them. My father like a security guard at a velvet rope. My mother embarrassed by my breath in winter air. My brother uncomfortable, but not enough to be brave. His wife enjoying the slow-rolled humiliation. A part of me wanted to apologize, just to stop the noise. A bigger part stood still. Hey, I said, I'll go. Good girl, Mom said, already turning toward the lobby glow. Maybe next year. Miss Ellery, wait. The glass door swung, and Richard Chin hurried out into the snow. The club director, usually composed, had an edge of panic now. Behind his glasses, his eyes took in the tableau. My family spread like an arch. Me at the step. Richard, it's fine, I began. It's absolutely not. He looked past me to my father. What's going on? Why is Miss Ellery leaving? Members only tonight, I said quietly. Family's policy. Richard's confusion deepened. Members only? We don't have a members only policy on Christmas Eve. We're fully booked because... He stopped. Did you tell Miss Ellery she couldn't enter? Now look here, Dad began, stepping into authority he believed he owned. We're platinum members. We have every right to determine who we dine with. I'm Richard Chin, the club director. We've met several times, Mr. Anderson, during your membership application. Exactly, Dad said. So you know we're valued members. We're telling you our dinner is members only, our family members only. Your family members only, Richard repeated. His gaze moved to me, then back. Mr. Anderson, do you know who Miss Ellery is? Of course I do, Dad said, impatient. She's my daughter, and while we love her, she's not a member, so she can't join us. Mr. Anderson, Richard said carefully, a different current entering his voice. Maggie Ellery is not just a member of this club. She's not a member at all, Cynthia cut in. That's the point. No, Mrs. Anderson, Richard's mouth set. I mean, she is not just a member. The door opened again, and Sharon Mitchell, assistant director, stepped out, name tag catching the light. Richard, guests are asking about the commotion. Oh. She saw me, then my family, and something like understanding clicked across her face. Sharon, Richard said, eyes still on my father, could you confirm Ms. Ellery's status for her family? Sharon glanced at me. Ms. Ellery, she said gently, to me first, then turned. Maggie Ellery is the owner of Riverside Country Club. The silence that followed felt bottomless. The snow continued to powder down, the lobby carols muffled by glass. Derek gave a laugh that sounded like it had lost its way. That's impossible. Maggie works at a nonprofit. I do, I said. It isn't my only job. But you drive a Subaru, Mom said, like truth lived in upholstery. I like my Subaru. You live in a 2-bedroom apartment. I like my apartment. Dad's color climbed. This is some kind of mistake. She can't afford to own a country club. Look at her. She shops at Target. Mr. Anderson, Richard said. Professional composure nicked. There is no mistake. Ms. Ellery purchased Riverside 6 years ago through Ellery Holdings. She owns the property, the golf course, the tennis facilities, and associated assets. Ellery Holdings. My grandmother's name in the legal filings. The only person who had ever called me enough with a casserole and a ride and a $5 folded into my palm, whispering, "Save it for your own door someday." Sharon's voice softened, but it didn't bend. We're lucky to have her. She's been gracious about traditions and staff. Cynthia's pitch rose. How could Maggie afford to buy a country club? The same way I afford anything, I said. I work. You said you work at a nonprofit. I do. The Ellery Foundation, which I started after I sold my software company. Derek's mouth opened, closed. You started a software company? When I was 22, sold it at 26. For what? Mom asked, numbly like a punch. Enough. Dad sat down on the step as if the marble had offered to hold him up. And you never told us. You never asked, I said, not unkindly. You assumed because I didn't perform wealth the way you wanted. Richard cleared his throat. Ms. Ellery, I apologize. If I'd known your family was turning you away, I'd have intervened sooner. It's all right, Richard. It's not all right, he said, eyes flicking to my father. Anderson family behavior tonight raises conduct concerns. Another figure approached, crisp cane striking the stone in neat, authoritative taps. Charles Piton, board president. Richard, we have guests waiting. What is this? A misunderstanding, I said. The word tasted calmer than I felt. The kind, Sharon added, where the owner of the club was told she couldn't enter. Charles's gaze cut to my parents and back. Miss Ellery, are you all right? I am. Around us the air shifted. Not the temperature, something quieter. Not pity, not awe exactly. Alignment. Sharon closer at my left shoulder, Richard at my right. The door's warmth behind me, like a hand between my shoulder blades. My mother put a trembling brightness on her face. Maggie, darling, why didn't you tell us? Come inside then, of course. We'll eat together. Her voice wavered, just enough to let the calculation shine through. Optics, relationships, the way this would read. I exhaled and watched it cloud the air, and then vanish. The snow kept falling. The pearls at my throat felt cool and steady against my skin, each one a small moon. The word owner hung over the entrance like a bell still vibrating. I could hear the muted clink of glassware inside, the muffled laughter, the carols modulated through door seals. My father stared at me as if I'd dragged the building from the earth out of spite. My brother stared at the ground. Cynthia stared at the door, already picturing which table still carried prestige. "We'll both be seen exactly where we belong," I said, more to myself than to anyone else. The steps, the threshold, the familiar wall I'd been pressed against since I could remember. I could turn, walk back to the Subaru, and let them keep their hierarchy and their dinner. Or I could step past them, into a place I owned, into a room that for years they decided was above me, and decide, finally, what belongs to me. Inside, someone laughed, a bright, ordinary sound. I lifted my hand from the brass, and the club director and his assistant shifted subtly, forming a perimeter that felt nothing like a blockade and everything like a welcome. The snow lightened, or maybe I did. I reached for the door. The warmth inside the Riverside Country Club hit me like a wave. Golden light, murmured laughter, the scent of pine and slow-cooked roast, all wrapped in the quiet hum of money that had never included me. For a second, I just stood there, snow melting off my shoulders, watching the room tilt in my direction as whispers began to travel faster than breath. Richard Chin kept pace beside me, voice low but firm. "Ms. Ellery, we'll handle this. Please take your time." His tone had shifted from apology to authority. It wasn't a favor. It was recognition. Behind us, the door swung again. My parents and Derek trailed in, their faces trying to reassemble composure. Cynthia clung to Derek's arm, her diamond bracelet flashing like a defense mechanism. Charles Piton, board president, gestured toward the foyer. "Let's step aside," he said, his cane punctuating each word, "before this becomes a spectacle." It already had. We moved into the side hallway near the portrait of the club's founder, an oil painting of a man who'd probably never imagined a woman like me owning his empire. Sharon Mitchell followed, iPad in hand, already taking notes. Dad began first. "Look, this is all just a misunderstanding. We thought there was a members-only rule tonight. No one meant disrespect." Charles's expression didn't change. "A misunderstanding? You barred the club's owner from her own property. I'd call that something else." Mom's voice trembled but didn't break. "If she'd told us, we never would have—" "Patricia," I interrupted quietly, "I never hid anything. You never asked." Richard looked at his screen. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, your platinum membership was initiated 8 weeks ago. You've spent $12,000 to date, standard rate." Dad straightened. "And with that comes privileges." "With that," Richard corrected, "comes expectations, including respect toward all members and staff. You've already accumulated multiple complaints for dismissive language and unreported damage to club property." Derek's head whipped toward him. "What complaints?" "3 from servers, 2 from valet, 1 from maintenance," Sharon said, scrolling. "All filed within the last month." Cynthia exhaled sharply. "That's ridiculous. We've been perfectly polite." Richard's calm returned, colder now. "Polite isn't a synonym for superior." The silence was a living thing. Charles turned to me. "Miss Ellery, as board president, I'm obligated to address this formally. Their Heritage Club application is still under review. Given tonight, I suggest we postpone—" "No," I said, "we deny it." My mother flinched. "Maggie, please, don't do this." I faced her. "Heritage status isn't a punishment to lose. It's an honor to earn." Her lipstick had smudged slightly, and for the first time in years, she looked older, not from age, but from effort. "You can't hold this over us forever." "I don't intend to." I turned to Richard. "Their current membership can continue, but it's under review. Any future complaints about staff, member, or conduct come directly to me." Richard nodded, typing fast. "Understood." "And one more thing," I added. "The platinum dining discount. Remove it effective immediately." Dad's voice jumped an octave. "You can't do that." "I can," I said. "Membership privileges reflect standing in the community. Right now, yours is compromised." Cynthia's hand clutched Derek's. "This is humiliating." "Humiliation," Charles said dryly, "is the price of poor behavior in public." For a long beat, no one spoke. The hum of conversation from the main room leaked through the doors. Crystal glasses clinking, the faint music of a string quartet. A different world, one they'd thought they controlled. Then, from across the lobby, a voice carried, "Ms. Ellery, Merry Christmas!" Dr. Robertson, one of the club's oldest members, approached with his wife. "Will you be joining us this evening?" I smiled, genuinely this time. "If you'll have me." "Always." His eyes twinkled. "We saved you a seat." He glanced briefly at my parents, who shifted under his politeness like it burned. As the Robertsons drifted toward the dining room, Mom tried again, her tone rehearsed but shaky. Maggie, sweetheart, let's sit together. It's Christmas. Let's not create a scene. You already did. Her mouth opened, then closed. I turned to Charles. I'd like to propose a new policy for the next board meeting. Any member who discriminates against another based on perceived economic status should face immediate suspension. Charles nodded once. Consider it added to the agenda. Richard's radio crackled. Sharon leaned closer to listen. Sir, the lobby guests are starting to ask questions. Some heard there was a situation involving the Anderson family. Of course they did, Charles muttered. Dad looked around, desperate for control. Can we please handle this privately? This isn't necessary. I studied him. The man who taught me to stand tall, but only if it made him look better. Privately is how you've always preferred it, isn't it? He blinked. What's that supposed to mean? That your lessons only mattered when there was applause. For a heartbeat, his posture faltered. Sharon stepped forward. Ms. Ellery, the Robertson table is ready for you. I nodded. Thank you. Mom reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve. You're making a mistake, Maggie. People will think that actions have consequences? She withdrew her hand like she'd touched something electric. As I turned towards the dining room, Derek finally spoke. His voice was low, almost human. Maggie, don't do this. I stopped but didn't face him. Do what? Make enemies of your own family. You already made that choice when you locked me out. I walked toward the golden light of the dining hall, every step clicking softly on marble. Richard and Sharon flanked me instinctively, not bodyguards, not staff, but witnesses. The doors opened to reveal chandeliers spilling light like champagne across the tables. Conversations dipped, then swelled again as recognition rippled through the room. My mother's voice trailed faintly behind me, a broken ribbon of "Maggie, please," that no one answered. The Robertsons rose when I approached. Mrs. Robertson's smile was warm and uncomplicated. There you are, dear. We were wondering. Sorry to keep you waiting, I said. Not at all. Dr. Robertson gestured to the seat beside him. You're among friends now. As I sat, I could still see the entrance reflected in the mirrored wall, my family lingering in the threshold, frozen in uncertainty. The maitre d' whispered something to Sharon. She nodded, then looked back toward me. They'll still have their reserved table, I said quietly, answering the question before it formed, right where everyone can see them. Richard's lips twitched into the faintest smile. Understood. I picked up my glass of water, the condensation cool against my fingers, and exhaled. For the first time all evening, I felt the room exhale with me. Across the lobby, my parents stood in the doorway, bathed in the same light they'd once tried to keep me from. Only now they looked like guests waiting for permission to enter. The clinking of silverware and murmurs of polite conversation rose and fell like waves around me. The dining room shimmered in candlelight. Polished wood tables, evergreen centerpieces, and the faint scent of cinnamon and champagne. From where I sat beside Dr. and Mrs. Robertson, I could see everything. The reflection of chandeliers in the polished floors, the waitstaff gliding like shadows. And across the room, my family. They were seated at their table near the center, exactly where everyone could see them. My father's posture was ramrod straight, his attempt at composure betraying the tightness in his jaw. My mother's hands rested perfectly still on the white linen, the only movement coming from her thumb, brushing the rim of her wineglass. Cynthia kept whispering to Derek, eyes darting across the room, unable to stop herself from glancing at me. Dr. Robertson raised his glass. To good company, he said warmly, and to kindness, the rarest wealth of all. To kindness, I echoed. The champagne was cool and bright on my tongue, the bubbles carrying a lightness I hadn't felt in years. Mrs. Robertson leaned toward me. We've been hoping you'd come tonight. You've been the talk of the board lately. Those scholarship expansions are incredible. Thank you, I said, smiling. The foundation's been growing faster than I expected. It's good work, the kind that matters. From the corner of my eye, I saw a waiter approach my parents' table, setting down menus. My mother barely looked up. My father adjusted his tie. The small orchestra near the fireplace shifted songs, and the sound of a soft violin filled the air like something fragile and pure. Dr. Robertson followed my gaze. You're watching them. I suppose I am, I admitted. Not out of revenge. Curiosity, maybe. He nodded knowingly. Family teaches us what love isn't before we figure out what it is. Across the room, Cynthia said something under her breath, and my mother's face stiffened. They'd all dressed perfectly, spoken carefully, calculated every gesture. But the pretense was cracking under the weight of attention. People were watching. They knew. Waiters and guests stopped by our table. Greetings, handshakes, a few warm smiles. "Ms. Ellery," said a woman I recognized from the local hospital board, "thank you for the new pediatric wing donation." I returned the greeting with genuine warmth. "You're very welcome. I'm glad it's helping." Another voice called from a few tables away. "Maggie, Merry Christmas!" "Mr. Tanaka," I said, smiling back. "Merry Christmas to you too." Each acknowledgement was a quiet revelation for my family, proof that I wasn't the invisible daughter they'd imagined. At one point, Sharon crossed the room to whisper something to me. "The Andersons' server asked how to process their bill later, ma'am." "At standard rates," I said softly, "and make sure the receipt shows the discount they would have received as platinum members before it's removed." Sharon's expression flickered with understanding. Understood. The evening carried on with laughter and conversation. The Robertsons spoke about their recent trip to Italy, showing photos of their grandchildren. I found myself laughing easily, warmth returning where cold restraint had lived for so long. The club, once a symbol of exclusion, felt strangely alive tonight, not because of wealth, but because of sincerity. When dessert arrived, a waiter set down plates of spiced pear tart and whispered, "Compliments of the chef, Ms. Ellery." "Please thank him for me," I said. Across the room, my mother's eyes found mine. She was pretending to read the menu, but her gaze trembled when I met it. My father leaned in to whisper something, his lips tight, his expression that of a man cornered by his own reflection. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tracing the edge of his water glass. I noticed his hand trembled slightly. Guilt or fear, I wasn't sure. Then, the inevitable happened. Their server approached with a leather folder, placing it in front of my father. I watched as he opened it, expecting to see the total with his usual discount. His eyebrows lifted. The color in his face deepened. He gestured sharply to the waiter. Richard appeared, almost instantly, calm, professional. He leaned down, explaining something quietly. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hand shot out, trying to calm him. Cynthia looked like she wanted to disappear under the tablecloth. Derek finally reached into his jacket, pulling out a credit card and handing it over with a hand that barely steadied. The waiter nodded, stepping away. My father's eyes burned holes into the table. Mrs. Robertson noticed, but said nothing. She simply laid a gentle hand over mine. "You don't have to look," she murmured. "I know," I said, eyes still fixed on them, "but I need to see it once. Just once." When the waiter returned with the check, my father took one look at the itemized list, each discount crossed out, each total printed clear, and stood abruptly. My mother rose beside him, red-faced and trembling. Derek followed, avoiding everyone's eyes. Cynthia, eyes glassy, rushed ahead of them toward the exit. They didn't look at me as they left. I watched their retreat reflected in the glass walls of the lobby. My mother's heels clicked too fast on the marble. My father's voice, sharp and low, cut through the murmur of the dining room as he argued quietly with Richard near the doors. But the director only shook his head once, politely, firmly, before they disappeared into the night. Dr. Robertson exhaled. "Friends of yours?" I smiled faintly. "Family." "Ah," he said gently. "Then you've survived worse than this dinner." The table laughed softly. As the orchestra began a slow rendition of Silent Night, something in me settled. The tension in my shoulders eased. The glow from the candles felt like the first real warmth I'd allowed myself in years. Mrs. Robertson touched my hand again. "You know, dear, people like your parents don't realize that love and pride can't live in the same house for long. One eventually drives the other out." Her words landed gently, not like advice, but like truth I'd been too afraid to say aloud. "I think," I said, "they mistook pride for protection. And you?" "I'm learning to protect myself without it." When the clock above the bar chimed 9:30, Sharon approached once more. "Ms. Ellery," she said quietly, "the Anderson party has requested their check." "They're leaving early?" "Yes, ma'am. They seem uncomfortable." "I imagine they are. Would you like us to process it?" "Process it exactly as we discussed, itemized, transparent." Sharon nodded and vanished into the hum of the dining room. By the time the Robertsons' dessert plates were cleared, I saw movement near the lobby doors again. My parents were there, signing the receipt, my father's face pale, my mother's eyes glassy and unfocused. Derek handed over the credit card again. Richard thanked them politely. Cynthia brushed past them first, shoulders rigid. They left without a word to me. The dining room continued as though nothing had happened, but I could feel it. The subtle awareness, the silent understanding shared among those who'd seen. The story would ripple through the club by morning. Mrs. Robertson refilled my glass. "Whatever happened tonight," she said softly, "you've handled it with grace. That's rarer than money." I swallowed hard. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "Merry Christmas, dear." "Merry Christmas," I whispered back. For the first time that night, my smile wasn't a mask. It was real. By the time dessert plates were cleared and the last toast echoed across the dining hall, I felt something shift inside me. Quiet. Irreversible. The Robertsons laughed softly beside me, trading stories about their grandchildren, and I joined in, almost forgetting that 2 hours earlier my family had stood between me and this very room. Almost. When the dinner wound down near 11, I rose, thanking my hosts. "It's been a beautiful evening," I said sincerely. Dr. Robertson smiled. "Maggie, it's not often we get to see justice with a side of pear tart. You reminded this club what real class looks like." Mrs. Robertson touched my shoulder. "And grace, don't forget that." "Grace," I repeated. "I'm trying." As I stepped into the lobby, the club had quieted. The scent of pine and candle wax lingered. Through the wide glass doors, snow fell again, softer now, blanketing the steps where everything had begun. Charles Peaton stood near the fireplace, cane in hand, waiting. "Miss Ellery," he said, gesturing toward a quieter corner. "A word?" "Of course." He lowered himself into one of the leather chairs, expression grave. "I've already begun documenting tonight's incident. Your family's conduct was unacceptable. I'll be recommending immediate membership revocation to the board." I folded my hands. "Thank you, Charles, but maybe hold that recommendation for now." His brows rose. "You want to give them another chance after this?" I exhaled. "I don't want to give them comfort. I want to give them consequence. Let's see if they can change when they know everyone's watching." He studied me a long moment. "You're more forgiving than I am." "Maybe," I smiled faintly. "Or maybe I just want proof that people can learn when they finally lose the illusion of power." Charles nodded slowly. "A fair test, though I won't place any bets." "I wouldn't either," I said. He hesitated before speaking again. "May I ask something personal?" "Of course. Why buy this place?" I glanced toward the portrait-lined walls, the same space that had once rejected me. "When I was little, my grandmother used to bring me to the edge of the lake behind the club," I said quietly. "She'd point to these windows glowing at night and tell me, 'One day, you'll walk through those doors, not because someone lets you in, but because it's yours.'" His eyes softened, and now it is. "It was never about owning it," I said. "It was about never letting anyone else decide whether I belonged." He nodded. "Well, you've honored her memory beautifully." "She believed in dignity," I said, "not status." Charles smiled. "Then you've built the right kind of heritage." When he left, the lobby fell silent, except for the faint crackle of the fire. Richard appeared from the side hallway, tablet in hand. "Ms. Ellery," he said, "about the Anderson family membership, how would you like to proceed?" "Honor their current contract," I said, "but note that renewal will depend on measurable improvement, attitude, conduct, contribution to the club community. If they backslide, we don't renew." "Understood." "Oh, and Richard," I paused. "I want a full report on their behavior since joining. Every staff interaction, every member complaint. I want to know if tonight was an exception or a pattern." "You'll have it after the holidays," he promised. "Thank you." He hesitated. "You've handled this with extraordinary composure, Ms. Ellery. Most people would have made a scene." "I lived my whole life being the scene," I said. "Tonight was just the conclusion." He smiled slightly. "Merry Christmas, ma'am." "Merry Christmas, Richard." I stepped out into the night. The cold air bit my skin, but it felt clean. My Subaru waited at the far end of the lot, coated in a soft film of snow among the gleaming cars. The headlights of my parents' SUV were gone. When I slid into the driver's seat, the silence was almost holy. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the building glowing behind me. Riverside looked serene again, like the world had reset. But it hadn't. It had revealed itself. My phone buzzed. A new message from my mother. "We need to talk about tonight." Not an apology, not even an acknowledgement. Just another command disguised as concern. I deleted it. A second vibration followed. "Derek this time. Please, let's fix this." I stared at the text, thumbs still. "There's nothing to fix, Derek," I typed back. "You showed me exactly who you are. I believe you." Then I powered the phone off. Snowflakes drifted across the windshield, melting in uneven dots under the heater's breath. I turned on the radio. Soft carols played, the same song that had floated through the dining room earlier. For a moment, I thought about Grandma again, how she used to hum while driving, tapping the steering wheel in rhythm. She'd always said, "The world will try to measure you by what you drive or wear, but never forget, integrity has no price tag." I smiled. "You were right," I whispered. In the rearview mirror, the club glowed like a lantern against the dark. Inside were people who valued decency more than decorum, warmth more than wealth. I'd found community there, even when I wasn't looking for it. My family had tried to keep me out of a world I built for myself, and now they'd wake up to find that the doors they'd guarded so fiercely never belonged to them. I put the car in gear and started toward home. The tires crunched through the snow, leaving clean tracks behind. At the exit gate, I paused and looked back one last time. The building stood silent, elegant, radiant, and for the first time in years, I felt no need to belong to it, because it finally belonged to me. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to stop performing for people who will never see your worth, especially when those people are family. The snow fell thicker now, erasing my tire tracks before I reached the road. I smiled into the dark. "Merry Christmas, Grandma." Then I drove on, free, uninvited, and finally home.